Well, my next guest, who I'd like to welcome on to my fireside, is Ye Jiawei. Would you like to come up? Jiawei is a specialist in family business, in family philanthropy and wealth transfer. He is a senior research fellow at the Global Family Research Center at Tsinghua University, a visiting researcher at the INSEAD Business School, and was previously an advisor at the Cambridge Family Enterprise Group. He's also worked with the World Economic Forum on building public-private partnerships between governments, corporations, and philanthropic organizations. Thank you for joining us, Jiawei. Could you provide a brief overview of your personal journey, since I've been asking lots of people this, into the philanthropic sector? How did you become interested?
Absolutely, and great to see you, Christian. Good afternoon, everyone. So I think I come from a background in family business, which is slightly different than the philanthropic sector, but I think in my own experience, there's a lot of overlap and interconnectedness between the two. So I've started, I come from a family business and started working in middle school as a family member, and then started at Tsinghua University as the fellow at the Global Family Business Research Center, which later on I became the executive director of many research projects. And where we already had a lot of focus on philanthropy, which was one of the kind of the areas of research for family business. And later on, I was also brought into advisory, where philanthropy was also part of the wider family enterprise ecosystem, and we're advising a lot of families on that. And one thing I realized in my journey is that we see a lot of need from family businesses to connect with each other and also to get support, to collaborate. So that's what brought me into the World Economic Forum, leading on the family business and philanthropic agenda.
Yes, I was going to come to the World Economic Forum next, and your work with them on the family business agenda. You were telling me that actually your personal catalyst for the work that you did for them was a particular report that came out by Edelman about trust. Talk us through that.
Yeah, so I think the work at the family business community at the forum was more basically responding to the question of what does it take for a business family to be successful over generations, and we take a stance on more a forward-looking stance. And several years back, so this Edelman report, they produced a report on trusts, for several years already, and basically they interviewed the wider public audience about trusts. And for, I think, a couple of years back, businesses have overcome government as the most trusted form of organization. More than the governments, more than the media, more than the NGOs. And within the business segment, we see that family businesses are by far the most trusted form of organization since a decade. Now with that, the other side was quite surprising. The rich and wealthy are being perceived as the least trusted entities or individuals, and bringing the most dividing factors. So it was
quite... this sort of disconnect between people trusting family businesses but not trusting business.
Exactly, and that was quite surprising because there's such an overlap, big overlap between the two. So the question is, what is really driving that disconnect? And that brought me to, in my recent works, to look at the question of philanthropy, but even broader on the impact of family business and family capital.
And what did you discover?
Well, I think, to continue on this subject, I think the main differentiation factor is to the perception on the role the family business is playing vis-a-vis of the local community, the different stakeholders. I think, for instance, very often family businesses have this long-term view and the wish of bringing legacy, for the business and the family to perpetuate. In Hong Kong, there's a very famous family, the Lee Kum Kee family. They have a plan for the business and the family to last for 1,000 years. Now, if you put that into perspective, it's the decisions that you're making today will be measured by future generations, and you can, if you want to last for 1,000 years or even less, a couple of centuries, you basically have to invest in what's around your business. And for us, that's a unique opportunity for family business owners, because if you look at around your assets, you really have this concentrated ownership. You can be afford to be patient, to be the patient capital. And you always have this family value, taking care of the local community. So there was this one example in one of the families that we work with, one of the largest Norwegian retail store chain. And the family has decided, because of their business model and products are so much linked to ocean, to nature, they've decided overnight to eliminate all palm oil in their products, and to replace it with
to eliminate all, sorry, what?
Palm oil.
Oh, palm oil, yeah.
Overnight, every
Wow.
product. That really shows the level of commitment and the impact you can make as family business owners.
Which would be very difficult for a listed company to do.
Exactly.
Right,
And essentially, if you want, you can make the changes. And that's why I see a great opportunity for family business owners to lead on that principle of responsible ownership, which is more a holistic way of viewing all your family assets, and not just having a siloed view, either with CSR or a corporate foundation or even your family foundation, which often come with a siloed view, where as owner you can really apply your family value across the board.
That's interesting, because it speaks to what Lindsay was saying earlier about how actually in a capital from family businesses or family trusts and so on can actually, if you like, address some of those market failures. So, I mean, your research, I know with the World Economic Forum, was looking at the impact on family businesses on society as a whole, and whether they can be mobilized for the greater good. So you seem to be saying, on the whole, your research would indicate that they certainly have the capacity to do that. I guess my next question is, how many of them are doing it?
Well, I think that's the movement that we're trying to start with. But from what
are these outliers, the examples you've given, or are they mainstream?
Well, I think it's becoming more and more mainstream, and especially in the Western market, I would say, where philanthropy has a kind of it's in a more developed stage. But we see more and more families taking on that stance, and also from the examples I'm hearing since this morning, it's great to see that this is not something we observe in a niche, but that's something more widely accepted.
What are some of the other key trends that you've noted in philanthropy around the world? I mean, in just recently that we're starting to see.
Yeah, so I think it's more a recap of what has been already discussed this morning. But and I'm glad to hear those examples, because those are showing that we're really already applying those new ways of thinking, and also more impact way of doing philanthropy. So the first trend I'm seeing, it's more shifting from the focus on how much money we've given away, from looking more at the impacts of our philanthropic actions. I think most of the case, and in more the developing markets, and even in my own family example, we always look at how much money we've given to this foundation or to this school. But now there's this general increased focus to look at, well, what is the impact of my giving?
So actually measuring, you're seeing much more studying of measuring it. Yeah.
We see a lot of more focus on the theory of change, and actually even coming with that some more innovative way of looking at philanthropy, like venture philanthropy or impact investing. So the lines are being more and more blurred here. The second trend I'm seeing, it's more it's less about fixing the issues, but not creating the issues. So it's great for philanthropy to address some of the societal challenges, and don't get me wrong, it's absolutely needed, and maybe I'll come to that point later on. But it's even greater if we don't create those issues in the first place, through the way we manage our businesses or we do our investments. There's a growing question about what is the right level of profits. Producing profitable solutions in the business sense, it's important. Now, if you maximize profits at any cost and then fixing things with philanthropy, it's making less and less sense in the current world. And the last trend I see, it's more shifting from individual giving to a more collaborative approach, where people are realizing, it's individual strength and efforts are limited faced to the scale of the issues that we're facing, and philanthropists are being more vocal about their causes and also spending more efforts in bringing others along in a collaborative effort.
That's interesting. So just to recap, these three shifts, shifting to just, writing a check and giving to looking at measuring impact, shifting from fixing issues to rather fixing, not creating them in the first place, and shifting from individual giving to a more collaborative approach. Let me just drill down a little bit on the second one, fixing the issues and not creating them. Give us an example about, is this how that works? Presumably, this is about a more purpose-driven approach to family businesses, is it?
Yeah, absolutely. So, we've been doing, some research with HBS on that, and perhaps I can share a few examples on that. So there is this one Swiss family we've been working with, and it's in the 5th generation. It's the owner of one of the largest pharmaceutical company in the world. I guess at this stage it's pretty obvious. And maybe to give you another tips, the fourth generation family leader, it's also one of the biggest philanthropists in conservation and biodiversity. So now you should know who the person is. And essentially the family has been thinking about the future model of philanthropy, but also is one of the most impactful thought leader on the model of society and also for business. And actually in kind of reflection about that, about the future of philanthropy, the family member has actually shut down the foundation, that has been set up by the 3rd generation and that has been running for 30 years because the family has been trying to kind of look at what are some of the more innovative way of doing philanthropy and also making an impact. And
so they've shut down the foundation because now they want to have an impact through the family business instead.
Exactly. So one of the thing he told me is not how you spend the money, but how you make it. So essentially, it's the point is not how your business can fund your philanthropic efforts, but more how can you leverage your business to see the outcome you'd like to see in the world. And for him, your business is your most impactful platform, thinking about hiring tens of thousands of people, tens of billions of revenue, and the impact and the scale of change you can make, it's much larger than your foundation. So
in what ways? Just to explain how.
Well, in the way of how you treat your employees, right. How your product or your services are in coexistence with the environment. So all those different issues that in traditional philanthropy we're trying to solve. Well, I think the point here is how in your business and your business practice can you more incorporate those non-financial metrics right. and financial returns.
So we're going back to sort of, actually, let's explore the root causes of some of the societal problems, environmental problems, rather than using the money through a foundation to deal with the symptoms after you've caused the problem.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. And it comes back to how we are measuring our society in a way. And that's also addressed by the ESG metrics, right? Because in the last 50 years, we've been always running companies based on profit maximization and financial statements, where the ESG effort is really incorporating some of the environmental, social, and governance metrics into our reporting. And in some of the countries now, they're also, we measure economic progress by GDP, but now there are some recent efforts in incorporating natural capital in that equation as well. So I think there's a shift of thinking of how we measure things, how we measure value.
So here's the thing, is it good for the business? Is it good for the family business when they do that shift?
Well, I guess so. He hasn't been complaining. No,
I mean, a positive or no negative impacts on the bottom line so far?
I think so that business has been ranking on top of the Dow Jones Sustainability Index for 11 or 12 years now, and still remaining one of the most competitive business in the industry. And I guess the point is, at some point, reaching at a certain level of scale, it becomes your competitive advantages.
Okay, let's go to the third thing you talked about, which was this shift away from individual giving to more collaborative approach. Is this collaborating with governments, or is it about building partnerships and coalitions with other like-minded philanthropic organizations, or all of the above? And can you give us some examples on that one?
Yeah, so I think there has been several examples mentioned earlier with other speakers, like the PAA, and also at the World Economic Forum, we've been kind of launching this initiative actually with PAA. I can give another example, which is the Climate Lead, which is a non-for-profit. It was originally called Climate Leadership Initiative, co-founded by several philanthropists and foundations like CEF, the Oak Foundation, Christian Parker, and the Hewlett and Packard Foundation. And the idea was also precisely linking to they're acting in the space of climate philanthropy because they've seen the total amount of climate funding going to philanthropic giving going to climate is less than 6%, depending on different sources. So the idea it's how can we scale up and kind of amplify the philanthropic giving into climates. And the idea is to not only focus on the grants from those philanthropists, but also getting other people on board along the way. So they have this model of beyond the grant dollars support, which is they provide advisory support for free for other philanthropists. But the peer philanthropists who co-founded this initiative also spent a tremendous amount of time in sharing their networks and also convincing other philanthropists, but also sharing their expertise and philanthropic strategies to help others get on board, but also supporting others in their philanthropic efforts. So it's kind of had this more collaborative effort, and I think since a couple of years they've raised $4 billion of additional philanthropy given to climate solutions. So that was majorly successful.
That's pretty positive. The Chinese government has in the past 2 years announced the Common Prosperity Agenda. Can you define that for us? And also, how does philanthropy fit into that agenda? And maybe, again, give us a couple of examples.
Yeah, so I think maybe not just, I think we don't have time for common prosperity, but give it in a nutshell, very high level.
Yeah.
So I think it was proposed by President Xi as a vision toward a more inclusive and fairer society. I think we have to put it in the context of, after decades, China has been majorly successful in bringing down the number of people living in absolute poverty, right? So they've reduced that number by 800 million of people. And now if you look at long term, the rate of return for wealth, which is the rate of return for capital, it's greater than the rate of return for income, which is based on your labor. And in the long run, that kind of reduces social mobility and also therefore increases inequality in the society. And there's no simple market mechanism that can reverse that trend. And I think so common prosperity, it's really an attempt to address that rise of inequality. And after the success in reducing poverty from an absolute term, now common prosperity is an attempt to look at it from a relative term, this question of inequality. And the way of addressing that is through basically 3 layers of redistribution according to that vision. The first layer is through market mechanism, where you're based on the principle of efficiency. You know, what's the most efficient solution? And the second layer is from public policy, market, fiscal transfer, taxation, based on principle of equity. How do you redistribute resources? And the last layer is through philanthropy and charity, which is based on the principle of ethics, right? Moral, how do you support the most vulnerable people? And I think from that layer, philanthropy absolutely has a great impact in contributing, and we see that in many of the examples in the Chinese society with the tech giant like Tencent, Alibaba, donating 100 billions of renminbi into social innovation and philanthropy, and many emergences of new philanthropists and giving in that sector.
Are we seeing governments investing more research into this issue? And I suppose, I mean, you've spent most of your career researching this area. Are governments doing more, and where do you think that research focus should be? What's the next thing that people should be looking at?
Yeah, so I mean, I think first there's a point which is linked to what I have just described, which is if you look at the scale of philanthropy, it's quite limited. You know, in the context of so for instance, in 2019, the total amount of giving in philanthropy in China, it's only less than 1% of China's GDP. So if you really try to solve some societal challenges, you basically have to collaborate with the government and the private sector, and which is linking back to what have been discussed this morning. You can really kind of leverage on the strength of each sector, I think that's the area where I'd like to see more research, and I think more focused, you know, across the three sectors, because with some market mechanism, it's quite hard for corporations and investors to invest in early stage solutions, and that's the space where philanthropy can really have an impact with catalytic funding, being nimble and agile, and they can really fund the very high risk projects. And for the private sector to scale it up, and the public sector then to come in with a favorable policy environment. So I see that would be a really fantastic area for research.
Now, I know you've worked in Davos with the WEF and on this subject. Are there enough forums like this, like the one that we're in at the moment, where people are brought together and discussing these issues? I mean, I know they're growing, but are there enough spaces like this? Yeah, so earlier I think you know, we mentioned PAA, AVPN. I think those are great forums, and I think in the current stage of the world, we definitely need to see more you know, forum like Talking Philanthropy, and really want to applaud Ben you know, for making this happen, and also everyone to be present. I think we're living in a world, you know, with geopolitical shifts, societal division, and also climate risk, climate challenges, and philanthropy. It's really one theme that can bring all together, and it's great to have this East-West conversation more often. So it's really great and a lot of value for everyone. Jiawei, thank you very much. I think we've got any questions for the audience before we break? Because I think we're about to break for lunch. Edwina, microphone coming to you.
Thank you. I don't necessarily expect you to know the answer, but I just wanted to pose the question because somebody might. We've heard a lot about philanthropists in Asia giving to education and the climate, and obviously as someone who works in the justice system, I wondered if you had any knowledge about giving to the justice space. And by that, I don't just mean prisons, judiciary, police, probation, you know, the whole landscape there.
Well, you're right, I don't have the answer. But I think it's more a question to the audience as well. But indeed, it's not the most common area of giving, and especially I think in Asia. I think in my entire career, I've only seen one charity who's very active in that field, and it's based in the US. But yeah, you're right, yeah.